He was just an old man in a faded cap, leaning on a cane, standing quietly at the edge of the firing range. His boots were dusty, his jacket too big, and his hands trembled when he signed the waiver. The younger guys laughed, nudged each other, whispering loud enough for him to hear, "Should we call the paramedics now or after he drops the rifle?" One even offered him a chair, not out of kindness, but mockery. No one knew his name. No one cared. They just watched, smirking, as he slowly walked to the lane, picked up a rifle, and adjusted the sights with fingers that no longer shook. What happened in the next 10 seconds? Silence. The entire range. Welcome to Hidden Sparks. Before we continue this emotional story, tell me in the comments, from which city in the world are you watching this video today? And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit the subscribe button to support the channel. We're growing every day, and I sincerely thank you for being part of it. He arrived just after opening. The sun was barely up, the asphalt still slick with dew, the parking lot mostly empty. His pickup truck looked like it hadn't seen a wash in a decade. Matte green with rust creeping under the doors, duct tape across one rearview mirror. But it started without coughing, and he drove it slow, like someone who no longer had a reason to rush. He parked in the farthest corner, away from the other vehicles. When he stepped out, it was clear this wasn't just some Sunday hobby. His walk was deliberate. Not slow because he was weak, but slow because he'd learned somewhere along the line that rushing gets you killed. The range staff didn't notice him at first. They were busy prepping targets, laughing over coffee, teasing the younger instructor who'd shown up late again. But one glanced up when the old man entered the office, signed the waiver without a word. He was polite, nodded, paid in cash. No small talk, no explanation. His driver's license was old, creased from years in the same wallet. His name was William, just William. No last name legible anymore. No one bothered to ask. He carried a simple duffel bag, canvas, military issue, from a different era. Its seams were worn thin, its zipper grease-smooth from decades of use. He didn't carry it over his shoulder. He held it low, like he was still on patrol, minimizing his profile, one hand on the strap, the other tucked deep into his jacket. The range instructor, a former Marine named Jace, noticed the way he moved, low, to the ground, always aware, always watching, but didn't think much of it. Plenty of old-timers came through, some with stories, most just looking to remember something. William asked for Lane 7. No one had claimed it yet. It was the farthest lane, the quietest, near the berm where the range ended and the hills began. From there he could see the whole setup. He liked that. Jace walked him over, unlocked the cage. The old man gave a small nod of thanks and stood there for a moment, just looking out. Behind him, the younger group started to arrive, loud, fresh out of some weekend tactical training camp. New rifles, expensive scopes, combat beards, body armor with American flags they hadn't earned. They came to shoot, but mostly to impress each other. They saw the old man and smirked. One muttered, "Grandpa Rambo," under his breath. The others chuckled. William didn't react. He was already unpacking his gear, a pair of shooting gloves worn thin, an old ball cap with the logo of a unit long disbanded, and a weapon wrapped in an oil-stained cloth. When he unwrapped it, Jace leaned in. It was a classic M21 Vietnam-era sniper rifle, wood-stocked, iron-sighted, with modifications you didn't buy at any store. Custom barrel, polished bolt, suppressor port. Everything maintained like it had just come off the line. The young guys didn't recognize it. One asked if it was a hunting rifle. Another snorted, "He probably hunted Hitler with that thing." More laughter. The old man never looked up. He inspected the barrel, ran a cloth down it, clicked the bolt twice, then gently loaded a magazine. Jace stood nearby, arms crossed, pretending not to listen, but watching everything. There was something off about this guy. Not dangerous, just quiet in a way that made noise seem inappropriate around him. The young men, 5 of them, started showing off. One had a brand new AR with a digital scope, another timed his reloads with a smartwatch. They were cocky, but not cruel, not yet. But when William stepped into position, took a deep breath, and shouldered his rifle, the joke started again. He gonna fall over from the recoil? Hope someone's got 911 on speed dial. Yo, can he even see the targets without a walker? Still, he didn't respond, didn't flinch. He adjusted the scope, a vintage Redfield, no electronics, and then paused, not to hesitate, but to feel the air, the wind, the terrain, the same way he used to back when the silence around him meant life or death. It had been years since he last fired in public, decades, not since the funeral, not since the folded flag was handed to him by a young officer who couldn't even look him in the eye. He didn't come today to prove anything. He came because something inside him had shifted, a sense that maybe he was disappearing, becoming invisible. No one called, no one visited. His name meant nothing in the town anymore. The medal sat in a drawer. The letters from old commanders had yellowed. The war stories had stopped being told, and maybe that was how it was supposed to be. Maybe men like him were meant to fade away quietly, but something had changed last night. He had found the rifle, cleaned it, held it for the first time in years, and the moment he felt its weight again, not just in his hands, but in his chest, he knew he wasn't gone yet. The first few shots from the younger shooters echoed across the range, loud, fast, full of confidence. Their paper targets fluttered with holes. They shouted over each other's bursts of fire, comparing groupings, mocking missed shots like kids at an arcade. They weren't practicing. They were performing for each other, for themselves, and maybe just a little for the quiet old man standing at lane 7. William hadn't fired a single round yet. He remained motionless, eye behind the scope, breathing steady, as if the world around him didn't matter, but it did. He could feel the energy in the air. He knew that kind of cocky noise. He'd seen it on the faces of rookies shipped out fresh, thinking they'd come back legends before they'd ever seen blood. One of the young men, tall, with mirrored sunglasses and a smug grin, walked over to William's lane, uninvited. "Hey, sir," he said, drawing out the word like a joke. "You need help sighting that relic in?" William didn't move, didn't answer. The man leaned closer. "You know this isn't a museum, right?" His friends behind him snickered. Jace, watching from the edge of the office, stiffened, but said nothing. He'd seen these types before. Not bad people, just full of themselves, clueless. And William? Well, he didn't seem to mind, but that wasn't quite true. William's grip tightened slightly, not out of anger, control. He'd spent a lifetime learning to breathe through noise, to see through arrogance. He adjusted the windage knob without breaking his gaze through the scope. The man finally walked off, shaking his head, muttering something under his breath about wasted lanes. A few more minutes passed. The younger group moved down to check their targets, bragging loudly. William stayed still. 1 breath, 2, 3. Then he finally exhaled and pulled the bolt back, smooth, deliberate, and loaded his first round. He didn't fire, not yet. The young men came back, their voices louder now. One of them, the youngest, started recording a video on his phone. He turned it toward the others, narrating in a mockumentary voice. Day 3 at the geriatric sniper range. Subject appears to be assembling his rifle since the Vietnam War ended. More laughter. $10 says he misses the whole board, said one. I say he drops the gun before he fires, said another. The youngest zoomed in with his phone. Let's get this on tape. Might go viral. Call it Call of Duty, Retirement Edition. William didn't look at them, but he heard it all. He had been called worse. Much worse. In languages the boys couldn't pronounce. He had been spat on, cursed, forgotten. But this was different, not hatred, just ignorance. And in a strange way that cut deeper, because it meant they truly didn't see him. Not a threat, not a soldier, just a shadow. Still, he said nothing. He raised the rifle, looked through the scope again, adjusted for distance. The wind had shifted. He recalibrated, barely moving. Then at last, he took the shot. The sound wasn't loud. Not like the others. Suppressed, crisp, controlled. The range staff barely heard it. The boys didn't even look up. Jace, though, he turned, because he recognized that sound. A professional shot, measured, centered. William cycled the bolt, ejected the shell cleanly, loaded another. Second shot. Same calm rhythm, then a third and a fourth. Each one like a heartbeat, precise, disciplined, silent in their deadliness. By the fifth, one of the boys turned. He's actually firing. The youngest checked his camera. Yeah, I think so. But like slow motion or something. Another burst of laughter. At that moment, William stepped back from the rifle, pulled off his gloves, took out a small cloth from his pocket, and wiped the stock gently like it was an old friend. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. Jace walked to the end of the range and checked the targets. He stared at Lane 7 for a while, long enough, that the others started to wonder. Then he waved them over. Wordless. Curiosity got the better of them. They jogged up the range, joking as they went. Let me guess, he hit the dirt. Maybe he hit the pole behind the target board. But when they got there, they stopped talking. The target was marked, not randomly, not chaotically. 10 clean holes, all within the center ring, 2 of them touching the bullseye, dead on, the others surrounding it so tightly they could have been punched by the same fist. One of the boys let out a breath. Wait, how many shots did he fire? Jace didn't answer. He didn't have to. The holes spoke for themselves. The youngest checked his video footage. No way, he whispered. No freaking way. He replayed the clip, zoomed in, counted. 10 rounds, 10 seconds. One of the older shooters nearby walked over and looked. He whistled. You boys ever heard of Carlos Hathcock? They shook their heads. Of course not, the man muttered. You ever heard of respect? They didn't reply. Jace turned back toward the firing line, but William was already packing up. Rifle cleaned, gloves folded, bag zipped. He moved like someone who hadn't come here. For praise, only for silence. The group returned to the benches, quieter now. The laughter had died. The jokes faded into awkward glances. One of them looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't know how. William reached the counter to sign out. Jace walked over, voice low. You mind if I ask where you served? William didn't answer at first. He simply stared at the range through the window. Then he said, places that don't exist anymore, and he left. No salute, no speech, just silence. The same kind of silence that used to fall after an ambush, when the dust settled and the adrenaline stopped, and you were left only with who you were. William didn't look back as he crossed the parking lot. The gravel crunched softly under his boots. The sun, now high enough to cast hard shadows on the pavement. Behind him, silence lingered at the range, like a fog. The kind that settles not when something ends, but when something is understood too late. He opened the door of his truck with the same quiet deliberation as before, placed the bag gently on the passenger seat, and sat still for a few seconds. No sigh, no dramatic exhale, just stillness, the kind that comes from years of waiting, years of holding your breath, even when everything around you is peaceful, because peace never lasts. Inside the range office, Jace stood frozen, eyes fixed on the sign-in sheet William had used earlier. Something about the handwriting, the signature, had tugged at him. He picked it up, stared at the faint ink, barely legible. William T.R. The last name smudged, faded. It clicked. Not all at once, but in pieces. The old rifle, the shooting stance, the rhythm, the grouping, and then the initials. Jace turned to the wall of honor, a corkboard littered with photos of veterans who'd trained at the range over the years, some with medals, some without. Near the bottom corner, behind a layer of newer snapshots, he found the one he remembered, a black and white photo yellowed at the edges. A much younger man in fatigues, kneeling in the dirt, with that exact same M21, no smile. Just eyes that had seen too much. The caption read, William T. Rainsford, SEAL Sniper, retired, Operation Ivory Coast, Laos, Cambodia, decorated with the Silver Star and Navy Cross. Confirmed 112. Jace stepped back, like someone had punched the air out of his lungs. He turned to the group still standing near lane 7, their cockiness now burned away by something raw, the cold sting of shame. "You guys have any idea who that man was?" he asked, voice low but steady. No one answered. "He's the reason half the shooting techniques you're trying to copy even exist. He trained your instructors' instructors. He survived missions they still won't declassify. That shot grouping? He did that under fire, in the jungle, in the rain, with malaria." The youngest swallowed hard, phone still in his hand. "Rainsford? That's William Rainsford?" Jace nodded. "You mocked a living legend." Nobody moved. One of the older men, the one who had mentioned Hathcock earlier, crossed his arms. "You boys should be ashamed. He didn't just shoot targets. He protected people, freed POWs, saved teams that never made the news." There was a long pause before the first of the group walked out, head down. The others followed. No jokes now, no swagger, just silence. Jay stepped outside just in time to see the old truck pulling out. He raised a hand, unsure if William saw. But the old man didn't wave back. He drove slow, turning down the road with the sun behind him. That night, the video went viral, not for the reasons the boys expected. The youngest had posted it with the usual clickbait title, "Old Man at the Range Shocks Everyone." Within hours, it had hundreds of thousands of views. But it wasn't the shooting that caught people's attention. It was the comments. One said, "I served with this man. He's the reason I made it home." Another, "Rainsford trained my father. He never missed, not once." Then came photos, old declassified reports, letters, commendations, a ripple of memory across generations, people who remembered, people who hadn't forgotten. By morning, local news stations were trying to track him down. Journalists called the range. Jace didn't give them anything. He just stood at lane 7, staring at the still hanging target, holes clustered like a constellation. William didn't answer the door when someone knocked that evening, but he watched through the window as 3 young men stood on his porch, the same boys from the range, now holding their rifles awkwardly at their sides. They didn't knock again. They simply left something by the door, a note, a small plaque. They'd made, engraved in metal, to William T. Rainsford, "You taught us more in 10 seconds than we learned in 10 years. He read it, then he looked out across his small, quiet lawn, where the flag still flew, faded but proud. He didn't cry, but for the first time in years, he felt seen, not as a relic, not as a stranger, as who he really was, a warrior. The days that followed passed quietly, like the world itself was giving space to breathe. William didn't turn on the TV. He didn't check his phone. He didn't search his name online. He just sat with it. The silence, the weight, the sudden shift that had unsettled something inside him, not in a bad way, but in the way you feel when something long buried finally rises to the surface. He didn't expect anything to come of that day. He hadn't gone to the range looking for recognition. He'd gone because it felt like something inside him was slipping away, and maybe, just maybe, one last shot could hold on to it a little longer. But the world didn't stay silent. A letter came first. Official Navy seal on the envelope. Inside, a note written in steady, dignified handwriting. "You saved my life in Cambodia, 1972. I never got to thank you. I saw the video. And now I'm making sure others know what kind of man you are. With all the respect in the world, Admiral. Peter Caldwell." Enclosed with the letter was an invitation, a private ceremony, a reunion of sorts, honoring men whose stories were rarely told and even more rarely believed. William stared at it for days, left it unopened on his kitchen table, until one morning, Without thinking too hard, he folded the paper, slid it into his coat pocket, and started the truck. The road felt familiar. Not physically. He'd never been to that base before. But emotionally. That quiet pull toward something unspoken. The ceremony wasn't grand. It was held in an old aircraft hangar, on a retired base, stripped of all pomp. No reporters, no cameras. Just rows of folding chairs, a line of flags, and faces. Men with upright posture and sun-worn skin, some in full uniform, others in faded civilian clothes. All of them carrying the same weight in their eyes, the weight of memory, of silence kept for decades. And when William walked in, he didn't have to introduce himself. They stood one by one, no applause, no cheers, just respect. At the front, Admiral Caldwell met him with a quiet handshake and a long look. "You trained the men who trained." "Me," he said. "We thought you were gone. Hell, we thought you wanted to be." William didn't answer, but he held the Admiral's gaze long enough to say everything that mattered. When they called his name, not shouted, just spoken clearly, he stepped forward. A small plaque was handed to him. Beneath his name, only 4. Words were engraved: precision, honor, silence, legacy. After the ceremony, as the crowd thinned, a young man approached him. Barely 20, clean uniform, nervous hands. He didn't say much. Just handed William a small black notebook. Inside were pages of handwritten notes, range calculations, breathing drills, quotes about discipline and clarity. And on the first page, written in block letters: "Everything I am, I owe to someone I never understood until I saw him shoot." William closed the notebook gently and looked at the young man. No lecture, no lesson, just a nod, a passing of something greater than knowledge, a transmission. That night, William returned home and didn't turn on the porch light. He stood in the bow, dark, hands on the railing, eyes on the stars. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel so quiet, and the silence didn't feel so lonely. 2 days later, he returned to the range, this time not to shoot. He didn't bring his rifle, just a folded flag under his arm and a slow, steady walk. When he reached Lane 7, he saw it, a small plaque now bolted above the bench. It read, "The Rainsford Line," and beneath it, in smaller letters, "Real shooters don't boast, they remember." Jace greeted him with a nod. No words, just respect. The same group of young men was there too, not joking now, not loud. Training, learning. One of them asked quietly if he could shake his hand. William nodded. Another asked if he'd ever come back to teach. He didn't answer, but he stayed, sat down on the bench, watched, occasionally corrected a posture, pointed to the wind flag, tapped the ear of a recruit who flinched too hard at recoil. He wasn't invisible anymore. He wasn't forgotten. He had become something else entirely. Not a legend, not a relic, a standard, and for the first time in years he felt at peace with that. William never liked goodbyes. In his world they were rarely spoken, only implied in the silence between men who knew they might not see each other again. But now, as he sat alone on that same weathered bench near Lane 7, a gentle breeze moving through the tall grass beyond the berm, he knew this chapter was closing, not because he was finished, but because he had finally been heard. The range was quiet that morning. A single young man, the same one who once laughed, now a new recruit, was practicing with steady discipline. William watched him from a distance. Every movement was sharper, every breath more controlled. Not perfect yet, but honest. He didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. His presence alone had become part of the place. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded letter, not addressed to anyone, not meant for mail. Just words he'd written late at night, when sleep wouldn't come. It read, "There comes a time in a man's life when he's not looking for recognition, but for remembrance. We don't need medals. We don't need applause. We need to know we mattered, that in some quiet way we shaped something that lasted longer than the wars we fought. I wasn't a hero. I did my job. And for a long time, That was enough. But time doesn't ask what you earned. It asks what you left behind. If you're reading this, maybe you're one of the few who still remembers that. He folded the note back, tucked it inside his old canvas duffel, and stood. Later that week, a simple article appeared online. No author name, no headline screaming. For clicks, just a title, 10 shots, 10 seconds, a lifetime. It was shared quietly among veterans, passed in group chats, forwarded in emails, pinned to bulletin boards in dusty VFW halls, and those who read it didn't ask for a name. They already knew. William spent his days, as he always had, repairing things around the house, tending the flag, drinking black coffee in silence. But something subtle had changed. The mail carried handwritten letters now. A boy from Texas, whose grandfather once served under William, a woman from Ohio who said her father only spoke about the war once, and it was about him. A retired Air Force mechanic who said, "You kept my brother alive long enough for us to say goodbye." It wasn't noise, it was remembrance, the kind that doesn't fade with time. One evening, William returned to the range. No gun, no gear, just a folded American flag under his arm and a simple mission. He walked to Lane 7, pinned the flag above the bench, and sat, not to shoot, just to be. A few younger shooters recognized him. They didn't approach. They didn't dare interrupt. They simply watched from a distance, quiet and respectful, adjusting their grip, fixing their stance. In that moment, William wasn't a ghost from the past. He was the standard, and, for the first time in a long time, he felt at peace with that, because legacies aren't built in speeches or ceremonies. They're built in what you inspire, silently through action. And as long as one young man corrects his aim, remembers the silence between each breath, and understands that true strength requires humility, then William Rainsford will never be forgotten. Maybe he looked like just another old man. But the next time you see someone sitting quietly, worn boots, distant eyes, don't assume they're nobody, because some of the loudest lives were lived in silence, and some of the greatest heroes never told their stories.